Hi everybody, and welcome back to Room 9, our region's largest classroom. My name is Miss St. Louis, and I'm a teacher at Rogers Elementary School in the Mehlville School District, and we are located in South St. Louis County. Today, I'm here to teach a reading lesson that's geared towards students who are in the 3rd grade, but all learners are more than welcome to join and explore with us. So let's get started. This week, we have been talking all about comprehension of text. And comprehension is the process of a reader making meaning of a text, right? So taking the words in a text and being able to figure out, what do these words really mean? What is the author trying to tell me, right? And so in the past, we've talked about author's purpose and how authors write a book for a reason, right? They might write a book to teach. They might write a book to entertain. They might write a book to persuade, right? Those are some of the reasons why an author might choose to write a book. But if an author is writing a book to teach me, maybe to teach me about how to save the planet, I need to understand what the author is trying to tell me, right? I need to be able to understand what the author is trying to communicate to me about helping to save the planet. So all this week, we're talking about different strategies that really good readers do to help them comprehend text. And so far this week, we have talked about how readers, as they read, can monitor their comprehension through the use of stop and jot notes, right? Using sticky notes to recognize interesting parts or sad parts or happy parts, right? And making predictions and really using those sticky notes to help keep track of our thinking as we go along in text. And yesterday we talked about visualizing as we read our text, right? And really helping to start to create the pictures and mental movies in our mind as we're reading to really bring those books to life, right? And today we're going to talk about another piece of that, and that is asking questions. And asking questions is when readers ask questions before, during, and after reading to help with comprehension. So not only are we going to ask those questions, but we're also going to answer those questions. And so I want to start off by talking to you about some common questions that you can use with most texts. Now, each text is going to have different questions that you either come up with as you read, right, or more specific to fiction or nonfiction. But a lot of these, right, are going to be some good questions that you can always start off by asking yourself and then go on from there. So before we read a book, we always want to ask ourselves, what is this text going to be about? So that's a good question, right? What am I reading about, right? What predictions can I make, right? Based on the title, am I able to make any predictions? Based on the pictures I see on the cover or the little, summary, right? On the back, am I able to make any predictions about what I think is going to happen in the story? Do I have a schema, right? And so we've talked before in the past about how schema is all the information that you have right up there in your brain, right? And you've collected information over all of the years that you've been learning, right? So schema is built up of the knowledge that you've learned, but also the knowledge that you've picked up just by living your life, right? From your personal experiences. So everybody's schema is a little bit different. So do you have a schema about the subject of this text, right? If this text is going to be all about the earth, well, we live on the earth, so we do have a bit of a schema, right? And you might have learned about the earth in class, so you have some schema about that. But if you're reading a book about the Roman Empire, and we haven't learned about the Roman Empire yet, you might not have much of a schema there. And last, is the text fiction or nonfiction, right? And we need to identify what kind of text we're reading before we start reading it, so that way, as we go into the book, we know what we're thinking and talking about, because the questions are going to be different based on a fiction or a nonfiction text, okay? So that's what we do before we ever start reading a text. Those are some really great questions to start you off with. Then, as you are reading, you can continue to ask yourself some questions as you're reading. Do I understand what I'm reading is a really great one to do if you're reading a chapter book. And at the end of a chapter, think to yourself, do I understand what I just read? Because if after a chapter you don't understand or you're really confused, that's the time to go back and reread the chapter. Because if you get 4 or 5 chapters into a book and you're like, oh man, I just don't know what's going on, it's gonna be a little harder to identify where your confusion kind of started. And I would hate for you to have to go back and read 3 or 4 chapters because you're lost. So the end of each chapter is a really good place to think to yourself, do I know what's going on in the text? And then you can kind of retell a little bit to yourself, okay, well, this is what happened in this chapter, and then go on from there. You can also ask yourself, what does this word mean, right? As we read, we always come across some new vocabulary words, especially in nonfiction texts. We know those are chock full of nonfiction vocabulary words that we may not be as familiar with. So ask yourself, what does this word mean, right? You can use context clues to help you figure it out. You can look it up. You can ask a friend, right? But making meaning of those words is really important to help making meaning of a text. Should I go back and reread, right? So we kind of already hit on this before, but pausing as you're reading to ask yourself is so important, because the last thing you want to do is finish a book and go, I don't even know what I just read. Especially if it's a really long book you've put a lot of time and effort in, right? Or maybe a book you have to use for an assignment in class. So always asking yourself, should I go back and reread that? It's a really great question. Excellent readers do. And what happens next, right? Continuing to make those predictions as you go along. So you can do this at that chapter point as well. So not only are you at the spot where you're going to say, do I know what I've already read? But you can also ask yourself, what do I think is going to happen next in the book, right? So chapter books are excellent because they give you those stopping and starting points for you. Excellent little pauses already included. And so once you're done reading a book, you can ask yourself some more questions, right? So after, were my predictions correct, right? Did I make some really good predictions as I was reading the book? Why did the author write this, right? Sometimes based on title and the book, we can kind of figure out the author's purpose. But definitely when we finish writing the book, we should come back and say, why did the author write this? Did they want me to learn something? Were they trying to teach me about something? What am I supposed to take away from this book? Next, can I retell or summarize the text, right? Am I able to give a little summary to my neighbor and say, hey, this is what happened in this book? And last, what did I learn, right? Even from fiction books, there are tons of things you can learn, like lessons and morals and themes. So definitely ask yourself, was there something that I was able to learn from this book? So today, boys and girls, we're going to practice asking and answering questions as we read a text together. And the book that we are going to read together is called Dragons versus Dinos. And the back cover says, up on Scary Tops Mountain, the dinosaurs are getting ready to try to outscare the dragons. Dragon scaring is great fun. However, when a baby dragon goes missing, it leads to unexpected events. So before I start reading, let's ask ourselves some questions. So what is this text about? Well, I can kind of already tell, right, by reading the back that we know that there's going to be the dinosaurs versus the dragons. And they're trying to outscare each other. And then a baby dragon's going to go missing. Okay, so some predictions I can make. Well, if a baby dragon goes missing and we know that there's a competition, maybe the dinosaurs took the baby dragon. That could be a prediction, right? And do I have a schema? Well, I've never met a dinosaur. And I've never met a dragon. So no personal experiences here, but I've read some books before that have some dragons in them. And you know what? I've learned a little bit about dinosaurs from some books I've read. So I have a little bit of schema. Kind of know what I might be getting into. And then, is the text fiction or nonfiction? Well, this is a fiction text, and we know that because, well, we know that the dinosaurs are extinct, so this isn't something happening right now. And we know that dragons are mythical creatures, so they are not real. So we're able to put that together. So, are you ready to dive in and see what happened to this baby dragon? Let's go. Chapter 1. Bobby Raptor had slipped away from the other dinosaurs. He was hiding in the forest, high on Scary Top's mountain. Stamping his feet and thudding his tail, he sent a secret message to his best friend. Ooh. I wonder what that secret message is. He had barely finished when he heard Papasaurus Rex calling out from below. Bobby, where are you? Come on, it's time for dragon scaring. On the other side of the valley, at Flames R.Us volcano, the dragons were conducting an important meeting. Your turn to keep watch, Nana Dragon informed Dottie Dragon. I did it last night, complained Dottie. Why can't Billy Boy do it? As she spoke, a lick of fire swished into the cold air, then disappeared in a flash. Because he's too young, snapped Nana. Why do we have to do it all? Asked Mama Dragon, sighing. Daddy-O Dragon reared up on his hind legs. To warn the others, he said. Then when the dinos come, we can scare them silly. In the end, Nana Dragon kept watch, but she soon fell asleep and her loud snores echoed around the valley. Nana fell asleep and she's supposed to be watching the baby dino. That doesn't sound too good. The dinos, paddling silently down Scary Top's mountain, had to stop themselves from laughing, all except Mamasaurus. I don't know why we keep doing this, she said, shaking her head. It's ridiculous. It's fun. We love it, said Belladocus. Get ready, dinos, Papasaurus commanded. 3, 2, 1, charge! Chapter 2. All right, so I finished my first chapter, so let's see. Do I understand what I'm reading? Well, I know that the dragons and the dinos are in this contest to see who's going to scare the others. And we know, right, that the baby dragon, right, the little dragon was trying to contact his friend with a secret message. And we know that the baby dino, right, is being left alone with Grandma, but Grandma fell asleep. Right? We didn't come across any words we didn't know yet. Right? Should we go back and reread what we understand what we're reading so far, so we're good there. So let's see if we can make a prediction about what we think happens next. Well, if Nana's asleep, I'm thinking baby dragon baby dragon's gonna leave. I'm thinking he's gonna try and get out while Grandma's there. So he might be going somewhere he's not supposed to. All right, let's keep reading to find out. All at once, the side of the dragon's Flames R.Us volcano shook with the sound of pounding feet as the dinosaurs roared to the top. Dino alert! Screeched Nana Dragon, waking up with a start. In a flash, the dragons rose up, flapping their wings and breathing out bright flames. Retreat! Yelled Papasaurus. The dinos thundered back down the side of the volcano. When they arrived back home, they sat around moping. That's one of those words I don't really quite know. What does it mean if they're moping? I use a picture to help me. They're moping around. Yeah, they're sad, they're upset, right? They might be a little angry at themselves, right? Because they're the ones who got scared and had to run off. So they're definitely feeling a little down. All at once, the side of the dragon's Flames R.Us volcano shook with the sound of pounding feet as the dinosaurs roared to the top. Dino alert! Screeched Nana Dragon, waking up with a start. In a flash, the dragons rose up, flapping their wings and breathing out bright flames. "Retreat!" yelled Papasaurus. The dinos thundered back down the side of the volcano. When they arrived back home, they sat around moping. That's one of those words I don't really quite know. What does it mean if they're moping? I use a picture to help me. They're moping around. Yeah, they're sad, they're upset, right? They might be a little angry at themselves, right? Because they're the ones who got scared and had to run off. So they're definitely feeling a little down. "That was terrible," said Belladocus grumpily. "Not fun at all," the others agreed. Bobby waited until no one was watching, then crept off towards the mountain. Where is he going? Is he gonna try and scare them all on his own? I don't think he's any match for those dragons. At the Flames R Us volcano, Nana Dragon was puffing out bright red flames. "Emergency meeting!" she announced. "All dragons must attend. It's time to teach those dinos a lesson." One by one, the dragons entered the volcano's great cave and began to figure out a plan. That night, as soon as it was completely dark, they flew silently through the air, swooping off towards Scary Tops Mountain. They giggled to themselves. Those dinos were in for one big scare. All right, we're at the next chapter, so let's see what's going on so far. We know that they've tried to scare each other, and, well, this time the dragons beat the dinos, right? They scared them off back down the hill. But in the meantime, little Bobby snuck away. And we don't know where he's going yet, but we know that he snuck away. And now the dragons are going to go to Scary Tops Mountain to try and sneak up on the dinosaurs. So let's see what's going on. I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll have to see. The dragons had barely made it to the valley when they saw a flash of lightning followed by a clap of thunder. "Keep going!" ordered Daddy-O Dragon. "What's the point?" asked Mama. "Our breath will be snuffed out by the rain. Let's go home." "We're almost there," insisted Daddy-O. "Come on, everyone!" But at that very moment, the clouds crashed together and a flood of rain poured from the sky. The dragon's glowing orange and yellow flames turned instantly to little gray puffs of smoke. "Ha ha! You all lost your fire," laughed the dinos, making fun of the soggy dragons. "Stupid weather," said the dragons grumbled under their breath. Bobby Raptor was up on Scary Tops Mountain. His heart was beating excitedly. "Mamasaurus," he called, "come quickly, I found something." Mamasaurus came to join Bobby in the woods at the top of the mountain. "What have you dragged me up here for?" she asked impatiently. "Look," said Bobby, pointing. Mama gasped. "It's a little boy dragon. Is he all right? He's very still." "What's your name, little one?" "Titch," came the little scared reply. "Well, I think you'd better fly back home," Titch said Mama. "It's not safe here." "I can't. I'm too tired," replied the little dragon in a small voice. "Oh dear," said Mama, looking worried. "What shall we do?" So, the end of another chapter, we can check in and see, well, the dragon's plot to scare them did not work. Their plan didn't work out because of the rain, right? And then on their way home, they went home, but Bobby went up to the mountain and he found a little baby dragon. And he showed the baby dragon, right, Titch, to Mama, and they're trying to figure out now how to get him home because he's too tired to fly home himself. So I think maybe they'll bring him home, right? Maybe they'll put him on their back and bring him home. That might happen. Let's keep going. Let's keep reading. Chapter 4. On the Flames R Us volcano, the bright eyes of Mama Dragon gleamed in the dark as she flicked her head this way and that. "Where's Titch?" she asked the others. "He's around here somewhere," said Daddy-O. "Don't worry." But Mama Dragon was worried. Finally, after she had looked absolutely everywhere, she slipped away. There was only one place that Titch could be, and Mama was going to save him. Meanwhile, on Scary Tops Mountain, Mama Saurus had made a decision. "Come on, Titch," she said. "I'm going to take you back home." "I'll come too," said Bobby Raptor. The little dragon got up slowly, and they all went down the mountain into the valley. So they're going to bring him home. Mama Dragon got a big surprise as she flew over the valley. It looked like 3 dinosaurs were approaching. One was much larger than the others, and the smallest one seemed to have wings. It was most odd. "Hey, that's my mama," said Titch, looking up. "Mama! Mama!" he shouted at the top of his lungs while trying to fly. Then he sank to the ground. Mama Dragon's eyes flew wide open. "I'm coming, Titch, don't worry," she cried. Mama Dragon flew down and stood face to face with Mama Saurus. Chapter 5. Uh-oh. Well, they figured out that Titch was gone, right? And so Mama went out to look for him, and she ends up finding him walking home with Bobby Raptor and Mama Saurus. Well, she's probably going to be really happy that they're bringing home her little baby, right? Maybe they'll become friends after this. I don't know. Let's keep reading. "Thank you for bringing Titch back safely," Mama Dragon said. "I was so afraid." "We'd never hurt a little one," interrupted Mama Saurus. Then she frowned. "To tell you the truth, we've never hurt anyone, not even a fly. Dinosaurs enjoyed roaring and charging around. That's all." "Same with us," said Mama Dragon, her eyes twinkling. "We like to swoop around and puff out fire. It's silly, really." The 2 mothers smiled at each other. Then Mama Saurus began to laugh. And after a moment, Mama Dragon joined in. They laughed and laughed. "Are we friends with the dragons now?" asked Bobby Raptor after a few moments. "I think we are," replied Mama Saurus. "Good," said Titch, jumping up and grinning at Bobby Raptor. "Our plan worked." "Plan? What?" exclaimed the 2 mamas. "We planned the whole thing," exclaimed Bobby Raptor. "We've been friends forever. We send each other secret messages from the mountain and the volcano," added Titch. So that's what that secret message was about. "You little monsters," chuckled Mama Dragon. Then she turned to Mama Saurus. "Why don't you go and get the others? You're all invited to a party at our place." So that's what Mama Saurus did, and the party was a roaring success. The end. So at the end of the book, there are some other things that we can do, right? Were my predictions correct? Well, some of the predictions I made were correct, and some of the predictions, right, as we went along, we made were incorrect, and that's totally okay. Predictions are made, they're guesses, right? And so sometimes we get them wrong, and that's totally okay. Why did the author write this? Well, she kind of wrote it for entertainment, but she also kind of wrote it to show us that we can be friends with people who are different from us, right? The dragons and dinos can be friends even though they're a little bit different. Can I retell or summarize the text? It's definitely something I can do, right? And so one of the ways we know that we can retell a story is with the somebody wanted but so then, right? So somebody, right? The dragons and the dinos wanted to scare each other and win their scaring contest. But the baby dragon went missing. So when Mama went to go look for him, right, she found him, and then they realized, right, that they didn't need to be scaring each other, that they didn't want to scare each other anymore, and they became really good friends, right? So this is just one way that I can quickly summarize up a story. Now, this works a lot better when we have some shorter stories, right? It might take us a couple sentences for each thing, right? When we're talking about longer books that have some more complicated plots about them. But this is a really great way that we can summarize a story, right? And what did I learn? Well, I learned that Dinos and dragons can be friends, right? And it's okay to be friends with someone who's a little different than you. And I also kind of learned, right, that people can be sneaky and try and have these little plans to help each other out, right? So, asking questions is a really important skill. We ask ourselves questions all the time, every single day. We are always questioning about what's going on in the world around us and why is that happening and where are we going and what's going on, right? And so questioning is something that's very natural to us. It's really one of the things that helps us learn, right, is to ask questions and then look to solve those questions. So it's very natural for us to continue that process of asking questions as we read texts, right? It can help us to think deeper about what's going on in the writing and really aid in building our comprehension of a text. And so as we read, right, we read for meaning. And questions help us to find the meaning of a text, right? They really help us to go in and say, you know what? That's why I'm doing this, right? That's why the author chose to do this. That's why the author wanted to write this. So questions are really, really important. All right, so boys and girls, today, our big topic as we were continuing our conversation about comprehension was about asking ourselves questions as we read books. So asking ourselves questions before we even start reading a book, right? Before we even open up the cover, asking ourselves some questions about making predictions and what do we think is going to happen and what's this book about, so we can really get our mind prepared to read. Then asking ourselves questions while we're reading, right? Do I understand what's going on? Do I need to go back and reread to help me understand what's going on? Do I have any questions about the words going on? And can I make any predictions about what I think is going to happen next, right? Really getting yourselves to kind of think, here's what's going to happen next, right? We've talked a lot about how chapter books really can help us break our books up because it's already broken up into chunks, which makes it a little easier to pause and think. And lastly, when we finish a book, we can always ask ourselves some more questions. Were my predictions correct? Can I summarize the book, right? Why did the author write this text? And what was I able to learn from reading this book? So the next time that you're reading your book, any book, right, I challenge you to ask yourself some questions, right? And start this process off small. Start by asking yourself some questions before you read. Then start to ask some more as you're reading. And finally build up to where you're asking some questions before, during, and after, right? This is a process that's going to take some practice. So definitely start it off slow, right? And maybe you stick with some simple questions like predictions and go from there. So boys and girls, I hope that you enjoyed this lesson today, and we'll see you again next time here in room 9. Bye everybody.
Teaching in Room 9 is made possible with support of Bank of America, Dana Brown Charitable Trust, Emerson, and viewers like you.